For 3 years, the courtroom had learned to expect Yang Meimei's silence. She sat in the witness box like a shadow stitched into wooden law books, eyes lowered, hands folded so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters held their breath. Lawyers sharpened their questions like knives. And yet, no matter how aggressively the prosecution pressed, no matter how theatrically the defense provoked, Yang Meimei never spoke. Not a word. Her silence became the most unsettling presence in the room. The case itself was already one of the most controversial legal battles in recent memory. A powerful business empire had collapsed overnight. A respected public figure stood accused of crimes that stretched from financial fraud to a mysterious death ruled accidental, under suspicious circumstances. At the center of it all was Yang Meimei, the former executive assistant, the woman prosecutors called a missing key, and defense attorneys dismissed as emotionally unstable. But Yang Meimei refused to play either role. From the very first hearing, she declined to testify. She answered questions through written statements so carefully edited they revealed almost nothing. When asked directly about the night, everything changed. She simply stared at the table. Her silence frustrated the judge, infuriated the public, and fueled endless speculation online. Why wouldn't she speak? Some believed she was protecting someone powerful. Others whispered about threats, hush money, or a secret deal made behind closed doors. Social media spun darker theories. That she was complicit, that she had blood on her hands, that silence was her shield. But those closest to the case noticed something chilling. Every time a specific name was mentioned in court, Yang Meimei's breathing changed. She didn't look afraid. She looked prepared. Investigative journalists dug into her past, expecting to uncover scandal. What they found instead only deepened the mystery. Yang Meimei had no criminal record, no financial irregularities. Former classmates describe her as quiet but meticulous, the kind of person who documented everything and trusted no one blindly. Former colleagues recalled her uncanny memory and habit of keeping copies just in case. Just in case of what? The prosecution assumed her silence would eventually crack under pressure. Day after day, they tightened the questions, circling closer to the truth they believed she was hiding. The defense, confident in her muteness, built their strategy around her refusal to speak, painting her as unreliable and emotionally fragile. The courtroom had settled into a predictable rhythm until the final week of trial. It happened on a gray morning when no one expected surprises anymore. The defense called its last witness. The judge asked if the prosecution had any final rebuttal. The room buzzed with restless anticipation, not excitement, exhaustion. Then the judge turned, almost as an afterthought, and asked Yang Meimei a routine procedural question. Do you still choose to remain silent? For the first time in 3 years, Yang Meimei lifted her head. The movement was small, almost unnoticeable, but it rippled through the room like an electric current. Cameras snapped. Lawyers froze. Even the judge paused, sensing something had shifted. Yang Meimei looked straight ahead. Not at the lawyers, not at the jury, but somewhere beyond them, as if addressing a truth that had waited long enough. Her voice, when it came, was calm, clear, unshaking. I stayed silent, she said, because the truth needed time to survive. One sentence. That was all. Gasps filled the courtroom. The defense leapt to their feet in protest. The prosecution stared as if the ground had cracked open. The judge ordered silence, but the damage or revelation was already done, because that sentence changed everything. In those few words, Yang Meimei reframed the entire case. Her silence was no longer weakness. It was strategy. It suggested knowledge far deeper than anyone had accounted for, knowledge she believed would be destroyed if revealed too soon. The prosecution immediately requested permission to reopen her testimony. The defense objected furiously, arguing procedural violations. But the jury had already heard enough to sense they were missing something crucial. Behind the scenes, panic set in. Within hours, sealed documents were suddenly unsealed. A forgotten evidence log resurfaced. Investigators re-examined a hard drive previously dismissed as corrupted, and buried within its files was a timeline, one that aligned perfectly with Yang Meimei's written statements, but contradicted the defense's entire narrative. It became clear why she had waited. Earlier attempts to introduce this evidence would have failed. Witnesses who could verify it were not yet protected. Digital records were incomplete. One premature revelation could have erased everything. Her silence had been a holding pattern. A pause. A calculated delay. When court reconvened days later, Yang Meimei spoke again. Not dramatically, not emotionally, but with surgical precision. She didn't accuse. She didn't speculate. She simply described sequences of events, dates, instructions she had been given, and documents she had been told to destroy, but secretly duplicated. The courtroom realized something terrifying. Yang Meimei had never been powerless. She had been waiting for the system to catch up to the truth. As her testimony unfolded, the image of a frightened, silent woman dissolved. In its place stood someone who understood the dangers of speaking too soon in a world where truth could be buried by influence and money. Her silence had not protected the accused. It had protected the evidence. By the time proceedings ended that week, public opinion had completely reversed. Headlines no longer asked why Yang Meimei refused to speak. They asked how close the truth had come to being lost forever. One sentence had undone years of assumption. I stayed silent because the truth needed time to survive. In a courtroom built on words, her silence had spoken louder than any testimony. The moment Yang Meimei finished her testimony, the courtroom was no longer just a courtroom. It became a reckoning. Legal analysts watching from New York to London noted something unusual. The defense did not cross-examine her aggressively. Instead, they hesitated. Their questions were cautious, almost fearful, as if every answer risked opening a door they could no longer close. That hesitation did not go unnoticed by the jury or by the millions following the trial across Europe, Asia, and beyond. Outside the courthouse, leaked whispers began circulating among journalists. A source close to the investigation revealed that Yang Meimei had submitted a sealed package weeks before her final testimony, a package the court was legally barred from opening until she chose to speak. Inside were encrypted files, handwritten notes, and a private timeline mapping decisions made behind closed doors. The silence now made sense. She had known the system would test her endurance before it tested the truth. When the package was finally reviewed, it exposed a chilling pattern. Meetings that never appeared on official calendars, financial transfers broken into fragments to avoid detection, and one instruction repeated again and again in internal messages: keep Meimei out of it. They feared her long before she spoke. Former allies distanced themselves overnight. One executive quietly resigned. Another hired new legal counsel within hours. Even the accused avoided eye contact, as Yang Meimei described how she had been treated as invisible, trusted with secrets but denied protection. And then came the revelation that stunned everyone. Yang Meimei admitted she had been offered a deal early in the investigation. Not money, not immunity. Silence. Permanent silence in exchange for safety and a clean exit from public scrutiny. She refused, not loudly, not heroically, but methodically. Instead of disappearing, she stayed. She documented. She waited. Legal experts across the UK and Spain describe her approach as rare but devastating. In many high-profile cases, truth collapses under pressure. Witnesses speak too soon. Evidence is discredited. Narratives are hijacked. Yang Meimei did the opposite. She let false stories grow so large they could no longer hide the truth beneath them. Across Asia, social media lit up with a new phrase translated into dozens of languages. Silence is not absence. It is preparation. But the most haunting moment came near the end of her continuation testimony. When asked if she was afraid now, Yang Meimei paused. Yes, she said, but not of speaking. I was afraid that if I spoke earlier, no one would be listening anymore. That single line shifted the case from scandal to legacy, because Yang Meimei's story was no longer just about one courtroom or one verdict. It became a global reminder of how power operates, and how quietly it can be dismantled by patience, precision, and timing. Even as the trial moved toward its final phase, one thing was clear. History would remember the sentence that broke the silence, but would also remember the discipline it took to hold that silence for years. And the world is still uncovering what else she protected by waiting. This is not just a case. It's a lesson unfolding in real time. If you want to stay ahead of stories that powerful people hope you'll never fully understand, stories that unfold slowly, dangerously, and truthfully, then this is where you belong. Subscribe, follow, and stay with this channel as we continue to uncover the moments, decisions, and hidden strategies that change everything. Not just in one courtroom, but across continents, globe showing Europe, Africa. Because some truths don't explode. They wait